Hi, David Bizard here, and you're watching PowerTec 10. It's still July the 4th, and I'm working on that video that does the timing chain power absorption tests. Now, there's a story behind this, and that's the start of it. A couple of years ago, I had some pretty severe brain surgery and lost a lot of my memory. But my doctors, two gals who are brilliant surgeons, said that I need to talk to my friends because certain things may stimulate a burst of memory recovery. They were right. So I got to thank a lot of my friends for helping me regain very much of my memory. But here's the deal. This also happens when you do certain things. And whilst I was doing the timing chain story, it suddenly occurred to me when I was doing that, and I was in the middle of a whole bunch of dyno testing that I was doing for Harvey Crane. That in turn gave me a burst of memory that took me back to that time and what was a major test that we got involved in. That's Harvey Crane and I. Whilst we were out to dinner or lunch, can't remember which it was one of the two, and I gave Harvey an envelope with a whole, well, it wasn't an envelope, it was a box about this, about 500 pages. Said, hey Harvey, there's all the latest dyno tests, right? That'll take you a month to go through those, right? Anyway, we got talking, and one of the things he said to me was, you know, the populace at large, and that is the general hot rod guy rather than the expertise, somehow thinks that we can generate 100 horsepower with a cam change. And he said, can't be done. And I said, you know, Harvey, I'm not sure that that's correct. And he says, bet you we can't do it. And I said, okay, a bet. You're betting that your cams won't make 100 horsepower, and I'm betting that they will. Right? So let's give it a whirl. And that's where we're starting our story here. Is the 100 horsepower cam possible? Well, it's a few days since I did the introduction to this this video. What I'm going to do now is to give you a good idea of the test procedure that was used here. First off, I have to say that before Harvey could say, I'll bet you $500 you can't do that, I said, Harvey, I'll bet you $10 I can do it. Because, why did I do this? Because I knew Harvey wanted to lose the bet, and as was so often the case, he wanted to make it worth my while to win it. But I jumped in before he could do that. $10 was it. So if I won the bet, I'm $10 richer. If I lost it, well, I'm only $10 poorer. Anyway, let's take a look at our baseline engine, right? This was a 355 cubic inch small block Chevy. It was a 30 over, and it was a pretty good build for what it was. Basically, it was a dyno mule engine that we had been testing pistons with for sealed power, and I'm pretty sure that it had the D-shaped dish pistons in, which with the head skimmed, we had about 9-to-1 compression. A quick afterthought on pistons. We did these tests many years ago now. What, 1985-ish? 36 years ago. Since then, piston technology has moved along quite a bit. And although there may be a sealed power or icon equivalent to this, The piston I would recommend at the moment, because it's got 1mm rings in it and the same D-shaped dish that we used, is the Marley piston 16cc dish, part number 930210830. That will, with a 64cc head, give you a 9.2 to 1 compression. And that's the other thing, if you're going to build a replica of this engine, you might want to pump that compression up to about 10.5. And then the cam that we're going to finally recommend that you have is going to be Dynamite. Now, the plan here was to make sure that whatever cam we were using, we gave it the best chance of making the most power. So this meant that we would set the engine up with the stock, having the stock cam with the best carburetor and manifold combination for that spec. We would also change the rockers, the exhaust, and what else? I think that was about it, until we found the absolute best. Now, cylinder heads were mildly pocket ported, and they flowed about 200 CFM, 210 maybe, at about 500 lift. The stock cam, which was on, I believe it was 112 lobe centerline angle, right? The heads had 194, 1.5 valves. There was stock size valves for a 186 head casting. The rockers we ended up using were a 1.6 Crane rocker on the intake and a 1.5 on the exhaust. Headers were 1 5/8, and we used a 2-plane manifold, a Edelbrock Performer air gap. I think it was an air gap one. It was a Performer, but it was the model before the one they've currently got, because we ran these tests about 1985-86 time. And the carburetor that gave the best results was a 650. Right, any more carburation than that made no difference, and it softened up the bottom end. And that was what we ran as a baseline. Check the graph coming up, and that will show you the power curve that we got. Here's our baseline curve. As you can see, torque is not that high for a 350 cubic inch engine. Several reasons for this. One, the factory lobe centerline angle is far too wide for what is actually required. This is a 112 lobe centerline angle. We require on this engine, for the best results, about 107 to 108. As far as horsepower goes, that's fairly respectable for the spec of the engine, 326 horsepower. Now on to our super cam, right? I made the target, and I say that should have been we, because Harvey was hell-bent on making sure that he lost this bet. What we ended up with was a cam with about 295 degrees of seat duration. This is a hydraulic cam. And about 240-ish at 50. Now, the cam we finished up with wasn't a catalog cam. Here's the rigmarole we went through. using catalog cam profiles and grinding the cam on the right lobe centerline angle for our motor, we gained somewhere in the region of about 80 to 85 horsepower. Right? Now, going back to those days, the speed of the opening on flat tappet cam wasn't very fast because they would simply flatten themselves out. You know, the lifters and the lobes themselves wouldn't take much more acceleration and live. What we did was we got some of the GM armored lifters, right? They're stellite faced, and we ended up hardening the cams. The reason that we hardened them was Harvey decided that since we were so close to making this, he was going to run some designs on his computer and literally make a one-off, well, a pair of profiles to do a one-off cam. Could obviously have replicated it. So that was what we did. It got us to about 90 horsepower increase. And then it was a question of tweaking everything. Oh, I forgot to say, in each case, we would advance and retard the cam to find out where the best advance position was. And I'd say we got to the 90 horsepower. That was with a much bigger carburetor on it. I think we were running an 850 on it at that time. And the rockers on it were, well, they were Crane rockers, but they were supposed to be a 1.65, but the way we had them set up and the fact that they usually over ratio them, it worked out about 1.72. So the new lobe that Harvey did was about 3/8 of an inch lift, and so that gave us about 620 odd thousandths at full lift. So that helped the power a bit more, doing that. Then our next move was we hardened the cam and then polished it. Now let me tell you about the polishing. Right, the reason that I wanted to polish this was I'd had a guy come in and he said that his engine, he had a bracket race engine and he raced a lot. He just rebuilt it and it kept breaking valve springs. So my immediate reaction here, and he was using good springs for the time, that is. My immediate reaction was maybe the cam profile was bad. So I put it on my cam checker, and it had a very slight but consistent wave when you looked at the about the third derivative of the cam's motion. And I figured this was an out of balance wheel, and it was transmitting these vibrations straight to the valve spring and breaking them. He was barely being able to make more than about 5 or 6 passes before a spring would break. So I polished the cam for him, but I called up the guy that ground it. Can't remember his name, but he's a well-known guy. And I said, you're going to owe this guy here a camshaft because it's got lots of vibrations. It's generating vibrations. I'm going to polish the lobes for him to get him by for now. But when if this works, it'll still need a replacement cam. So anyway, I polished all the lobes. Now this is a roller cam. I polished all the lobes with a piece of soft wood and 400 grit emery. And what this did was it smoothed out the effect of the out of balance wheel. So the dynamics were better. And he was able to make about 60 or 70 passes before a spring broke. Right? Anyway, at that time, the engine came down and he had the cam reground, and of course when I checked it, it was pretty damn good. Guy didn't want to be embarrassed twice. And I didn't see the guy for about 3 years. Asked him how his engine was doing. He says, I'm still on the same valve springs. So polishing the cam can be a benefit to the dynamics. Anyway, I happened to tell Dave, the late Dave Crowder, about this when we were doing some spintron testing. And so we took a profile that was not too good. I say not too good. It wasn't up to scratch. It wasn't one they were going to sell. It was a setup cam. And we ran it on the spintron, looked at all the nasty stuff going on, and then I polished it with a piece of wood and 400 grit emery and smoothed it out, right? And we picked up about 200 RPM before it floated the valves, and the profile, the trace was so much better, it was almost unbelievable. Anyway, I guess it was probably next day Dave was making a polishing machine to do all this automatically, right? Crowder were polishing all their roller cams. Now, since that date, new cam grinders have come into being and polishing may not need to be the case. However, it was when we did these tests, so the cam got polished, optimal setting, then dyno tested. We ended up with 100.8 horsepower increase. So Harvey owed me 10 bucks. Here you see the comparison of the before and after curves. Notice that the torque curve has not only moved up in terms of foot-pounds, but is also occurring further up the RPM range. The power gain shown here is exactly 100.8 horsepower. $10 bet won. Well, I'm sure many of you will find the information interesting that we've just reviewed. But there's going to be some who will point out, what good's this if we can't get that profile? Well, folks, I already thought of this. Mike Jones is a friend of mine, and his cam grinding company's just up the road a ways. Not that that has any influence on why I use his cams, he just does damn good cams. But anyway, things have moved along a lot since 1980s era. And Mike has a lot of experience with flat tappet cams in cup cars when that's what they had to use. So I looked through Mike's profiles and found that there were several profiles that he did which were actually in advance of the ones that Harvey and I did. Now that's because of modern computer programs and better cores and things. Now, here's one that I can thoroughly recommend, but it's not cheap. Part number, or the profile number, is H74377LT. That is a 296/249 profile with a 377 lift. With the rockers that the crane rockers we used, that will give about 625 to 630 lift. However, again, we've got another possible improvement. PRW has a stainless steel 1.65 roller rocker, which is very high ratio off the seat. So it exaggerates this rapid opening that a flat tappet cam has. It's a very robust rocker. I can't remember the part number, but it's a 7/16 stud by 1.65 to 1 ratio, and it comes off the seat at about 1.78ish, as I remember it, and goes over the nose at about 1.73, 1.74. So it's almost a whole ratio up. So that will give very close to 650 thousandths lift. Right, what else? Now, oh yes, Mike's profiles have to be used with a stainless steel, a hardened steel hydraulic lifter. Part number 3842 HVM. And it's also ground on a hardcore tool steel blank, so none of it's cheap. So be aware. However, I am about 101% sure that Mike's profile will, under the test conditions we had, would exceed 100 horsepower gain over a stock cam. Now, there's a good side to this. Mike has some slightly tamer cams than this, which will idle better than the ones we used, plus will make as much power. So give Mike a call, but he's a busy man. Only do so if you are genuinely interested in making a purchase. Remember, I said these cams aren't cheap. How much power will they make compared with the roller? Well, they will, in the range that we're looking at here, be very close. So if you have to use a flat tappet cam, then this is it. Give Mike Jones a call. Jones Cams. Thank you.